Gentlemen, USTOA President and CEO, Terry Dale.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome. I'd like to start today with a moment of silence for South Africa's conqueror of apartheid, a fighter, a prisoner, a president, and a symbol. Nelson Mandela made us all proud. Thank you very much. So again, welcome. This session today is called Global Marketplace Intelligence. And I know, having met with the panelists last night, that I'm going to leave this session much smarter than I started today. So you've got a lot ahead of you. I want to start by sending a very thoughtful thank you to the USTOA Board of Directors. As I indicated yesterday, we have spent the last year working on a long-range plan along with our Associate Advisory Committee. But please help me in recognizing their efforts. If the board would please stand and be recognized. So let me introduce you to the sponsor of today's session. It's the Abu Dhabi Tourism and Cultural Authority. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Paul McDonough. Paul? Welcome.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to be here and to tell you a little bit more about Abu Dhabi. Not many people know much about Abu Dhabi in this market, so I've only got a few minutes. I'm going to show you some headlines that we've made in some of the key media publications over the last year and this year. Also, I don't know if some of you may have seen the CBS on TV, the Amazing Race program over the last couple of Sundays. We've had some great coverage there as well. So we're excited about that. Abu Dhabi is really up and coming. It's the capital of the UAE. It's the largest of the 7 Emirates. And it's very much a modern city. It's only about 60 years old, the Emirate. And you can see by this architecture, that's the education department for the government. I think it's the only circular skyscraper that has an elevator that goes there as well. So very much modern, but also keeping with the old as well. The Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque, which I'm showing you now, is probably our #1 attraction. Thousands of people will come there, visit every week. And what's really nice about this attraction, it's the guides are all by the local Emiratis who'll do the hosted guides for your groups as well. So it's a beautiful, stunning attraction. It's a must-see if you've only got one day in Abu Dhabi to visit the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque as well. So I'm just going to talk to you about 3 key areas in Abu Dhabi. There's the city itself, Abu Dhabi. Then there's the cultural heartland called Al Ain. And then there's the desert region. So I'm just going to stay in the city, and you can see more modern architecture. This is the Yas Viceroy Hotel, which is on Yas Island. And there's a lot of developments taking place in Abu Dhabi over the last 3 or 4 years, and there's a lot more coming on stream. So this is right on Yas Island where the Etihad Airways Formula 1 Grand Prix takes place. This happened there last November as part of the Grand Prix circuit. So it's really the adrenaline island. It's about 15 minutes from this city centre. A lot here is where a lot of concerts take place. New Year's Eve, we'll have the fireworks display. There's a lot of big events and happenings, but the Formula 1 will be the main attraction. We've also got the only Ferrari theme park in the world. So that's opened. A lot of people go for the thrill rides. There's a museum inside, all focused on the Ferrari car. So it's very well visited. It's also good for groups and for behind-the-scene tours as well, for any of your groups who'd like to do that. And then what's really exciting, this is probably for our market most important, is the Saadiyat Island. And this is also on the other side of the Abu Dhabi part of the city, about 20 minutes also from downtown city centre. And we're going to have the first, Saadiyat Island is going to be the cultural heartland for the major cultural institutions in the Middle East. And there we can see, just go back, this is the Louvre Abu Dhabi, and it's being designed by Jean Nouvel. And that's going to open up in 2016, so not too far. So hopefully then next year we're going to be doing behind-the-scene tours for some of your groups as well. So that's on stream to open up in a year and a half. Following that, we have the Zayed National Museum, and you can see the feathers. The form of that is the feathers of a falcon. And this has been, the architect for this is Lord Norman Foster, prize winner. So this is opening up in 2016, and then to cap it all off in 2017, we have the famous Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, which is designed by Frank Gehry. So we're really excited about these developments coming on. You can see this is how the island will look when it's complete. Those museums will all be connected by water taxis. A number of the hotels have opened up, St. Regis, the Park Hyatt, Monte Carlo Beach Club, to name a few. So this is really exciting, and it'll be really good for your future programs. And of course, a lot of new hotels. Just over the last 2 years since we opened the office in New York, a whole range of brand new hotels. All the brands that you're familiar with here in North America have opened up, from the Emirates Palace, used to be the Royal Palace, is now run by Kempinski. But all the other hotels, the Shangri-La, the Fairmonts, the Hiltons, the Sheratons, Jumeirah, they're all there in anticipation for Saudi Island in near completion, Westin as well. So just a few more slides to show you. We're talking about the city, and I'm going to talk about the Al-Ain, because I know for your groups, for the tour operators here, the culture is most important when you travel to the area. This is Al-Ain. It's the second largest city in Abu Dhabi. It's about 1 hour's drive from the city, and it's really where your clients can meet the locals, the local Emiratis. We don't have the large skyscrapers there. It's very green, natural. As you can see, it's where the date farms are, the plantations, there's natural water spring as well. Beautiful old markets, camel markets, traditional souks as well. And it's a great way for your clients to meet interact with the Emirati culture. It was also the birthplace of the ruling family, and you can see this house is now a museum. It's a palace, but the ruling family no longer live there, but it's a great way for your groups to go and visit and see how life used to be. And then the third region is the desert region, where most people going to the UAE want to experience the desert experience. This is where your clients can do the camel trekking, the 4x4 dune bashing, learn about the falconry as well, and also the Bedouin tent experience, dining outside under the stars in traditional way. There's also a beautiful 5-star property in Casa Al Sarab. I've got a couple of pictures of that. And that is right in the center of the sand dunes, a 5-star property. It's now won many awards. All the rooms are overlooking the sand dunes, and they have true Arabian-style property as well. The tapestry, the lanterns, all very unique. That's the last slide, and then I'm going to show you a short video. It's only a few minutes, but I'd like to say I'm here for the tourist board, but my colleagues from Etihad Airways are also here. Vijay will be on the stand, and also my colleague Patrick will be doing the appointments. And Etihad are expanding as well in the US market, also Toronto in Canada, and also South America. So Etihad, watch out, there's going to be some good news coming up over the next year. So we're very happy, and also our colleagues at Dubai Tourism, who we work closely with. So a lot of exciting things happen for the UAE over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you again to Abu Dhabi and Paul. That was a great presentation. As part of the session this morning, a way to keep you engaged with us is what we're calling the Abu Dhabi Tweet Spot. So Charo, if you want to come up here and staff the tweet spot, we encourage you to tweet Charo. Come on, don't be shy. And then throughout the course of the conversation this morning, Charo will interject. You can make a comment or ask a question of the panelists. So I encourage you to reach out to Charo. So our moderator for this session is somebody who is not only a friend to USTOA, but also a fan. She was our keynote speaker last year, and the response in the post-survey that you gave us was so overwhelming that we had to bring her back again this year, and hopefully future years too. Please join me in welcoming Anita Mandarada. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. And Al told me this would happen. I live in South Africa. It's a hard day. So thank you for the moment, and just to let you know, he officially banned me from looking at my email before I got on stage this morning. We wanted to talk about how the world is changing. Terry wanted to run a session that was going to, as he said, force everyone in the room, all the members, to look closely at how things happen like that. And we couldn't have had a more profound example than 24 hours ago when the world realized that we'd lost a hero. And suddenly, I'm quite confident, and as Wolf Blitzer said yesterday on CNN, people are going to want to travel to South Africa right now to see and to feel what it was like to be part of that miracle. So what we've done is we've pulled together a group of outstanding speakers and guests and panelists for the next session to talk about what we call global market intelligence. It is what we really feel is what is critical for people to understand is the issues that are going to be shaping travel and tourism and travelers as we look forward to growing our business in 2014 and beyond. They are issues that are around us and taking place that we have no control on. Some of them are outstanding. Last year, there were 1 billion international travelers that traveled around the world. 83 million Chinese outbound travelers left China with their passports and a large sum of money to go out and shop around the world to show the world their worth because they can. That generated $102 billion in international spend, excluding the travel costs. Huge wave of influence. We then talk about other waves of influence, and literally a giant wave that broke the Philippines in half less than a month ago. And if you look at now the world knowing what the city of Tacloban looks like, it's broken. That's now affected a country where it used to be more fun in the Philippines to travel. How do we respond to that? How do we internalize that? Yesterday, everyone in this room was incredibly blessed to have the honor and opportunity to meet a gentleman who was literally an architect of the new Egypt. Al-Hami, who is the chairman of Egypt Tourism Federation, has literally spent the last month working with teams across every religion and every culture to shape the new constitution of Egypt. And you had him in front of you. So it's not just a destination, it's a moment in our lives when we can say, we met that man and we support that country. That is enormously important. What we also need to take into account are other changes that are taking place. So what we thought we'd do is we'd bring together a group of people who really are, as Terry asked, and Terry, forgive me for quoting you on this, it's going to, as he said, force the members to look into the greater world and look at the issues that are affecting tourism. So technically speaking, yes, this is a global marketplace intelligence session. This is also what I like to subtext as tough love brought to you by Terry Dale. So to go into that now, we want to look at is saying, if the USTOA, which they have, has repositioned themselves as being the go-to when it comes to package travel and independent touring. If you're going to be the organization that ultimately does the hard stuff, what is the hard stuff? What are the areas of sensitization that USTOA can support the members in dealing with to be able to work forward in 2014 and beyond, and keep those great stats coming out of the survey even stronger in terms of optimism, opportunity for business growth, and opportunity to employ more people in your businesses? What's that all about? We're going to be talking about things like visas, airport taxes. What about the millennials? This group of travelers that are going to be reshaping everything that we do, we say, how we do it, where they go, where they want to go, when they want to go, and they want to go now, and they want it done their way. What do we need to be conscious of? So when we looked at how do we actually bring together some really sharp people, Terry and I got into a conversation. This would have been back in August, it must have been, around who are the right minds that we need to bring onto the stage to really tap into as friends and partners of USTOA who are going to make the difference. And we found 3 gentlemen who are outstanding, who are newly minted chairman and vice chairperson are going to be joining at a later stage, but we've got 3 speakers who I'll introduce one by one as we come up, and we do this, as we say, Jay Leno style, so using a different format. In many ways, as you can see the names on the screen itself, we have Dr. Michael Frenzel, who has, quite honestly, too many titles for us to actually fit into an hour. So I will simply say that he is the beautiful chairman of the WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council, and also the former chairman of TUI. He's also what I like to say, despite him being very young, he's truly one of the elders in our industry, a man of enormous wealth of information, experience, air miles, and a heart of gold. I've had the blessing of working with him, and I'll be shortly calling him on stage. We also have with us James Mueller, who has recently been re-imported back into the States, having spent 6 years in Japan with United Airlines. I also found out last night he's much more strategic than I gave him credit for. Because as we all went out to the beautiful dinner last evening and we found our places around the fire, James went straight for the s'mores. A smart man does dessert first, and all women are envious. So I had some time with James, and also a very dear friend of mine, Vijay Punusamy, who's the vice president of Etihad, and he hates me saying it, but he's the one who makes James Hogan look good. He is truly a nomad when it comes to the tourism industry. And he's a very dear soul in terms of really making people understand the beauty of the region that we've just seen Abu Dhabi giving us a window into. These 3 gentlemen are, for me, moderator candy. There's no other way of saying it, because they are just such sweet people to work with, and it's really my job just to make them all air traffic controlled through a conversation in which Jerry and Paula will soon join. So with that in mind, I'm going to first ask to join me on stage. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Frenzel. Thank you. Great. Excellent. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Forgive me. This desk is very bulky, and Terry's given me permission to sit on the desk. So, Michael, one of the blessings that we have in having you here, and thank you, because he's literally come across the world to be here, as you all have, is that you are one of the people that I know who is truly excited about things changing in the world and the way in which the tourism industry is growing and the seismic shifts. And you've suddenly broken into a smile, and I know that all these stats are starting to pop into your head. But when I say to you that what are the shifts that are taking place that genuinely make you feel this is the industry we want to be in for growth?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for the nice introduction. Unfortunately, my wife is not here and cannot hear this nice introduction. So perhaps you have recorded this. So talking about changes, basically, and you mentioned in your introduction some of the big changes. Every day is changing something in this world. And we are an industry which are very much dependent, I think, not only on environment, on political situations here. And when I founded TUI in the new TUI in 97, basically, the world was totally different. And therefore, being nearly 20 years in this industry and building up the new TUI travel, basically here, it was a totally change of the framework, the political framework, geographical framework, everything was changing, basically. So adopting and basically was one of my big jobs. So what is, in my view, what are the biggest issues going forward? One, I always call it, it's the global shift. You mentioned this. When I started in 97, basically the world was different. And you mentioned China. I was in China, and I learned that China, and you named some figures, I learned, I think, how fast they are developing, basically here. Global shift is, and this is the good news, our industry is growing. You mentioned the 1 billion travelers. In 7 years, we have basically the prediction of roughly 1.3 billion. It's a huge number. By the way, this will create new problems for some destinations. We have to basically protect destinations and find new ways, I think, to manage this. But this is only a side aspect. But there is growth, and the good news is our industry is growing, roughly 4%, 3% a year. And but interesting, if you see the different growth rates, it's in Europe 2-3%, Americas similar, and China, Brazil, Russia, double digit, 13%, 14%. So until the end of this decade, basically the biggest source market will be Europe. Europe will stay the biggest source market, but then it will change. And could you imagine in 10 years, it's one of the predictions we did in WTTC, that China will overtake the US as the biggest market by far. There will be more Chinese tourists than US tourists in the world. So this is a big change. And if you look at India, if you look at Brazil, similar figures here. So the question is, what does it mean for us, basically?
Just to jump into that, and exactly in that, what does it mean? One of the difficulty that I find with statistics is it's hard to feel the heartbeat. And you shared some numbers last evening when we all met around the fire, well, aside from when James disappeared to get his s'mores, that you mentioned some statistics about pilots. Can you please share with everyone, simply to get a sense of, oh my heavens, what we're talking about when we translate the percentages into actual faces?
There are two figures which are in my way. I was in the last couple of weeks couple of times in China. I was in Chengdu, one of the big cities in Sichuan, South China. And what I learned in our PATA conference there, the Chinese need, until the end of this decade, in the next 7 years, 195,000 pilots. So every second day, they are launching a new plane for domestic flights. Could you imagine what grows? On the other hand, what I also learned, and this is the other side of the coin, they are building up at the moment a huge, in my view, overcapacity in luxury hotel, basically hotels. In Chengdu, for example, they are building 25 to 26 five-star hotels, which will open in the next 24 months. And today, it's a city of 12, 13 million. But today, I think the occupancy is roughly 30%, the average one. So they're building up a big overcapacity. These are the two sides of this growth. On one side, a huge growth in domestic traveling, basically. On the other side, basically, huge investments driven by a lot of money. There are all the international groups, the Ritz-Carltons of the world who are going there with low risk. Of course, they're all operating contracts, basically, here. So it's a very differentiated picture, I think, if you look at it.
With these staggering numbers, and if we bring it back home now to USTOA and the package travel and the independent touring, how do we need to comprehend that? What does that mean for us in terms of all of these massive areas of growth? What does that mean for us?
The interesting point is, even if the markets are changing and Europe becomes a sort of museum, in 10 years, I think there will be more visitors to Europe than out of Europe, basically, here. Or even US or other places here. The most interesting thing is for all of us here that with the change of the markets, I think you can't simply, transfer your business models to the new markets. One of my deep insights is in the last 10, 15 years, there is not really a global tourism market. All markets are local, are regional, and the biggest, I think, message is adapt your product to these markets. You know the US market, which is totally different to the European market. In Europe, I think the holiday market, the leisure market is, you have an average stay of 10.3 days something. You know in the US it's 2 or 3 days, totally different. And even in the Western world, it's so different. And if you look at the Asian world, it's more different and diverse, basically, here. I was in the board of Volkswagen for more than 10 years, and I always told the management, compared to our industry, you have an easy job. You are rolling out your factories basically here on the same technology platform from one country to the other. We can't roll out our business model from one country to the other. We have to adopt this, and they are totally different. We are as two in Russia. Russia is different market. The Russian like sun and beach. The Chinese don't like it. The Russians are booking very short term, 1 week for departure. So it's totally different market, totally different behavior. And the big message is, I think, listen to your customer. See what's the customer. And by the way, there's an interesting story about one American company, your Home Depot clearly. And Home Depot tried to open some markets in China. And they failed because the main message was they did not listen what the customer really wants. Because in China, first of all, do-it-yourself, I think, is not popular because labor is very cheap. And the second was that all the parts you can buy in the Home Depot are cheaper around the corner in China because most of them are coming from China. So it's a very good example, I think, if you don't look what the customer wants.
Indeed. So.
Michael, to that point, and just so that the audience knows, you can tweet at USTOA or use the hashtag #TravelTogether. So, Michael, here's a question for you from the Mexico Tourism Board. We have seen various types of tourism like culinary, experiential, etc. What trends in tourism do younger tourists want?
Can you repeat it? It's very bad from
What trends in tourism do young people want?
What trends in tourism young people want? It's very interesting. We have, we call it a factory, a brain factory. We are looking what people are, and we are inviting experts from different industries, I think, and asking them, I think, what is the major trend, the future trend in tourism. And give an example, we have also experts from the car industry. It's very interesting. Younger people are more interested in, not so much interested in cars anymore. There's no emotional connection to cars anymore. So they are more interested in mobility. Therefore, all the car sharing models are popping up basically here. For us, it's very interesting basically here that younger people, I think, want to travel in a different way. And, but also there is not one answer. Give an example. I was in Singapore, and in Singapore we had a panel about the millennials. Younger people, it's a definition question between 15 and 25, basically here. And McKinsey asked the millennials, all the same age group. Normally you think they have the same behavior. They all with the iPhones, they all very, I think, digital, basically here. They asked the millennials in India, in China, in Singapore, in Indonesia. And they are totally different. How they want to travel, how they book, do they trust the internet? So basically, even I think there is not the young people. You have to look in the different countries, I think, what the young people want, basically here. But it's clear they want to be more flexible. One of the outcomes was, in general, I think, they want to be basically pressed in a scheme of 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Europe, or they want a totally flexible holiday, basically here. And for them, the experience is, they want to share the experience with their friends, basically here. So it's not so important where to go, but it's it's important for them what they experience and how they can share this.
Absolutely.
Totally different behavior.
Which is a lovely principle, and then we'll slide into having some company with you on the sofa. But that we have 1 billion travelers, but there are 1 billion individuals, and we need to treat them as individuals and understand that. Otherwise, we're actually losing the magic of all that we offer. On that, I'd like to now bring up on stage the Vice President of United Airlines, who is also someone who has experienced firsthand the shock of change that's taken place in Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, James Mueller.
Thank you.
Thank you. James, in many ways, Michael has given a sense of some of the waves that are affecting Asia itself, but you lived them. And I'd love to understand from you that through your experience of being in Japan and the Asia-Pacific region per se, for you as a professional, in addition to you being a leader within United itself, what were almost those paradigm shifts, or not even, what were the epiphanies that you really thought, oh my heavens, if we're going to grow in this market, we need to understand this back home. Can you share that with us?
Sure.
please?
Well, first of all, thank you for the introduction. Thanks to USTOA for the invitation to participate in this great event. I also want to give a shout out to everybody who was with me for the fun run this morning. Well done. And I was very impressed how many people I saw at the fun run who I also saw at the tequila tasting booth last night. The overlap there among
On that,
the two
I'm going
was
to pause you
wonderful.
for a moment. I think you might have dug a little hole, because when I spoke to Jerry this morning about the fun run, he mentioned the quality of runners and that he's going to need to be doing drug tesing outside at the
Yeah, I
coffee
think
break.
so.
I'm afraid.
I fully support that.
Please share.
But to get to your question, I think it's similar to what you've been talking about already. It's clear how fundamentally things are changing. And even when I first moved to Japan, I can recall people saying, asking people to come and visit, and so many Americans would say, okay, great, but what do we do when we get there? Their knowledge of Japan was so limited, and now, really a decade later, so many more people say, oh, I'd love to see Kyoto. The knowledge of international destinations is really, I think, expanding very, very rapidly, and so
What
I'm
has
encouraged
caused the
by that.
expansion? Where do you find that unlocking of curiosity and understanding is coming from?
I think some of it is the globalization of everything. So many people who work for maybe a company that was a small business now is doing trade with China, for example. And I think that opens people's eyes. Obviously, the information that's out there is so fundamentally different than it was. And then clearly the trends you've been discussing are very relevant in our business. I think about our services between the US and China. Mm-hmm. Even a decade ago, it was 80% Americans visiting China. Now, in the month of August, if we wanted to sell every seat 11 flights a day to a Chinese student coming to America, we could do it easily and still turn some away. So that change really in 10 years is extraordinary.
How has, sorry,
Sorry, we
please.
have a question on luxury airline travel from an individual. How, in your opinion, will the airline industry, the luxury airline industry, change in the future based on global demand? And this is a question for James.
Can I actually, I'm going to be very naughty as moderator. Can we pause that question and hold it for when VJ actually joins?
Sure.
Because I think there's a really good match there. So whoever asked the question, thank you for that. We're going to hold it for a moment. And then when VJ comes up, we'll actually, because I think there's a double response to
Holding
that.
pattern received.
Perfect, thank you. I'd love to understand as well from you, James, coming back now to America and being based here. From your learning in Asia, how have you had to shift the way you now operate here to be able to leverage that understanding and the opportunity?
Yeah, it's clear that even among our company, we have a lot of work to do to get ready for the growing internationalization of our business. And it really impacts every element of the services we provide. As more and more of our customers are non-Americans, we have to be prepared to deal with that throughout their journey. And it's one of the exciting uses of technology, quite honestly, in our business. I always say, we're never going to have a Mandarin speaker in Omaha, Nebraska. But on your iPhone mobile application in Mandarin, if you're in Omaha, Nebraska, you can take care of your business and get your service done. And I really think that as I look ahead, that kind of capability is going to be, for us, one of the ways we get around this problem.
Indeed. And Michael, hearing that, how does that work for you now when you look at it through the TUI eyes, knowing that the airlines are making this connection in those cultures?
This is our big opportunity, basically. I believe, perhaps one important point, there are a lot of people who, the normal reaction of people, changes is dangerous. Changes is, makes up me, I'm familiar, I don't like change. I believe quite the opposite is the message. Changes are creating opportunities. You have to see and recognize the opportunity and put it into a chance.
Absolutely. And then if you now put on your WTTC hat, seeing an organization like United now reaching out much more assertively globally and going through these learnings, how can associations like the WTTC be a vehicle to support independent businesses? And this is not a membership pitch, just to clarify.
It's
And
exactly,
actually,
it's exactly the question at the moment. I'm driving forward at the moment a strategic process in WTTC. WTTC, perhaps you know, was founded from Bill Marriott. Was a US association at the beginning. with a great idea, with a mission basically to educate the governments about the importance of our industry. One of our problems is we are always considered as a light industry somehow, and nobody of the, or very often I think the politicians and the governments don't recognize the importance of this industry. But this is changing now, I think, from becoming a more American and European association. Now we're becoming more and more global. We have 120 global members. 1/3 are Chinese members now. And all the big operators, online operators, they're all members here. And this is also changing the face and the mission of the association. And there are suddenly questions on the table, I think, how can you, in such a different world and structure, I think, be effective? So you have to discuss and think about regional chapters, for example.
Indeed.
So there's also in associations, I'm pretty sure the same in your nice association here, there is a need of change.
Indeed.
Because environment is changing, therefore the associations has to change.
Indeed, and it goes exactly to Terry's point yesterday as we left, that it's all about collaboration, because we will only become stronger together rather than competing and tapping into the richness of knowledge that is there. Question from Charu.
There's a beautiful segue, actually, a question that I wanted to ask about WTTC, coming from Malia Asfour of the Jordan Tourism Board. What is WTTC and similar organizations doing about getting more women leadership in our industry?
It's a,
Thank you, Malia.
it's a very important question, basically, here. But we are, WTTC as an association, also with the membership structure, it's reflecting the structure of the industry. And the basic question is, how can we get more women in leading positions in our industry? If you see TUI, for example, I think TUI, the major, basically, people are women working in TUI, 80–90%. But if you see the top management, and until, and even the second, basically, layer here, there are only a few one. And this is basically the challenge. The challenge starts in the companies, not in the association.
Indeed, and that's the essence of the opportunity itself, which is great. I want to link to that and looking at the way in which opportunities are growing, and ask now for our third speaker to please come and join us on stage. It's Vijay Punusamy, the Vice President of Etihad Airways. Please, Vijay. Thank you. Now, these two lovely gentlemen from the airline industry have promised to play fair. So they shook hands last night. They did shake hands, admittedly, over a fire burning. No, don't drink it. I
Not poison.
And just as a little outcall as well in terms of how the WTTC and organizations are reaching into the world, Vijay very much hosted the WTTC Summit last year in Abu Dhabi, which was incredible in terms of bringing the world of tourism leaders to the Middle East. And the keynote speaker was former President Bill Clinton, which was very special. So it's a lovely way of showing that indeed we exponentially strengthen ourselves by coming together. So on that point, and in coming together, and I'm just going to take a little moment to also call out some interesting information about Etihad itself. In many ways, Etihad Airways has shown that not only is the tourism world changing, but the game is changing profoundly. And just a little sense of how busy they've been in the last few years. If anyone believes in the concept of retail therapy, this is a very healthy man. Because since 2011, Etihad has acquired 29% of Germany's Air Berlin, 40% of Air Seychelles, 19.9% of Virgin Australia, 3% of Aer Lingus. In November, they received regulatory approval to acquire 24% of India's Jet Airways. And in January, they will achieve 49% investment in Air Siberia. Serbia, I figure. Well, it could be an option. That's next. Watch this airspace.
I know it's cold here.
Exactly. But what's also interesting about that is that in the way in which the tourism world is changing, so are the ways in which we're structured. We're coming together, we're collaborating. We're breaking airline alliances like Star Alliance, One World, and SkyTeam, to be able to create partnerships that actually connect them all together. And so Etihad has really been a game changer based on where the world is changing. I want to now go back to Charu's question, please, to you both, about luxury airlines.
Yes, and the question from Gina Sisko from Redpoint PR is, how will the luxury airline industry change in the future based on what you've seen on global demand?
I would be happy.
question.
I'm happy always when somebody asks me as a representative of United about luxury air travel. I appreciate that very much.
I think that was a setup. No.
I think maybe, I guess my comment on that, and I'll turn it over to Vijay for his thoughts as well. I honestly am really excited about the idea of luxury air travel, but also air travel in general. One of the things for me when I travel around the world, I hear all the time is people talk about the golden age of aviation and how wonderful it used to be 30 years ago flying on Pan Am or whatever. And I think now, we fly 787s, live flight beds, personalized TVs, nonstop from San Francisco to Chengdu, right? Was it really better 30 years ago? It was all men and they were all smoking, right? So I really think that the airline business has gone through a tremendous amount of restructuring in the last decade. But if I look out for the next 10 years, new aircraft, new flying, a much, much better passenger experience all around. And I think the growth in luxury travel will go hand in hand.
Indeed. And Etihad's perspective on that, particularly in terms of how you've stretched the experience to ground level, not just 35,000 feet.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you all for inviting me here. I must say, I've never met so many interesting people in 24 hours since arriving here. You actually represent probably the best of this industry of travel and tourism, in which I'm very proud to be a member of. And resonating the discussion yesterday about collaboration, this is something I firmly believe in, that basically travel and tourism, we actually are a community of linked interests. And when we work together, we actually can make a formidable difference. Unfortunately, people outside the industry don't quite understand that we are engines of growth. We actually deliver on not only on connectivity, but also on jobs. Travel and tourism last year generated $6.6 trillion US dollars to the global GDP, 260 million jobs. In the US alone, last year, it was 130 billion US dollars contribution to the GDP of the US, 70 billion dollars in taxes, federal, state, or local. ICAO found that when $100 is spent on travel and tourism, it actually generates 325 US dollars. Every 100 jobs in our sector generates 600 other jobs in connected industries. So we're actually a force for good, which has to be recognized and which has to be shared beyond our community. Because this is when governments, when communities start recognizing our role and see us as an engine of growth rather than either a cash cow or a sacrificial cow, or both, increasingly. So that's an important element. And when it comes to Etihad, which, by the way, in Arabic means united.
Oh, that's nice.
We actually were created only 10 years ago by our sole shareholder, which is the government of Abu Dhabi. And by virtue of the fact that we are squeezed between two giants, and the fact that our shareholder had a very clear mandate for us, which was to be viable, be safe, be best in class. And we had in those 10 years to actually do that and more. And when you start with a clean sheet of paper, you actually have the opportunity to think and act differently. And given our situation, squeezed between two giants and that mandate we had to think and act differently. And the focus has always remained on the customer. That customer-centric focus has remained perhaps the bedrock of the airline as we grew.
Indeed.
And also in terms of strategy, recognizing that we did not want to be another of our neighbors. We wanted to be our own airline. We wanted to grow at a pace which was reasonable, which was viable. And part of the growth had come from our own organic growth. We now operate to 97 destinations around the world. US market is a very important one to us. We operate daily to New York, to Chicago, to Washington, D.C. And as of 1st June next year, we're going to start non-stop services from Abu Dhabi to Los Angeles. And we also have now 86 aircraft. We have 47 code-share partners across all the global alliances, and we have 7 equity partners. So that partnership approach has been important for us as a way to grow, because we could not, if you want, catch up or even overtake others on our own. So we had to work with others.
Indeed.
The luxury market, of course, is critical for us. if you want, working with our own people in terms of delivering the best service at all times to the individual, who we actually call guests as opposed to passengers, to underscore the importance of that particular individual on a particular journey. Because sometimes we tend in our industry to get a bit blasé about passengers and take it all in stride. But for that particular individual, that trip may be the trip of a lifetime. You mess it up, you mess up somebody's lifetime. So it's important for our people to actually get that commitment to serve at the highest level. And we've been blessed to be recognized. I mean, we've now, last week, received the World Travel Awards. We received the World Leading Airline Award for the 5th year running. We received the Leading First Class Award, and we received the Leading Cabin Crew Award. The US Global Traveler magazine last week also gave us the Airline of the Year Award, the First Class Award, and the Best Airport Lounges Award. So the lounge is also a part of our, if you want, of our process of engaging with the customer, looking what it is the customer is looking for. And technology and geography are obviously our best assets.
Absolutely.
And with the aircraft technology being available today, being able to operate non-stop from Abu Dhabi to basically every point in the world, but offering the kind of service we felt the passenger was looking for. Honestly, I think that our business class service, when it was introduced about 8 years ago, became a winner because it had a flatbed, it had the sort of contours of privacy, and it had all the trimmings of a first class service. And the first class also have been highly recognized that way as well.
Fantastic. I must say, I'm watching James. I think you might get a LinkedIn request after this, President.
I do have a question for James very quickly, just because the tweets are pouring in. I'm very grateful for that. This is a question from Dave, and as Anita mentioned, it's a tough love forum. So how does United feel the merger of US and American Airlines is going to impact regional and even global aviation, and will it positively impact tourism?
I think that in general, consolidation has been very good for U.S. aviation, and so I expect over the long run the merger at American will have a similar impact. If you think back, certainly in my career, the biggest change that has been so fundamental to our business is trying to operate an airline with oil at $20 a barrel versus $100 a barrel. And just in that change alone and what that's meant for every aspect of our operations, it's really fundamental. I mean, every place we serve around the world, every, Pacific, Atlantic, US, if we're not 80% full every month in every flight in every market, we have no chance of making money. And that discipline that has driven on our business has been underlying so much of the evolution that we've seen certainly during my career. And finally, I think the U.S. market is reaching a point where we're stable and we actually have the ability to reinvest in the product, reinvest in new aircraft, and do so in a really professional way to improve the traveler experience. We're seeing the same situation now play out all over the world because there's always new competitors coming and they're very ambitious.
Indeed. And that's healthy and ultimately good for the traveler. Michael, I know wanted to make a quick comment, then I'm going to ask our newly minted chairman and vice chairperson to join us on stage. So quick comment from Michael, then we'll have another shift.
One quick remark about airlines, basically, and you mentioned this in your last remark. My airline, without doubt, are important for our industry. Connectivity is one of the keys, basically. What's frightening me is the low profitability of the airlines worldwide. I visited the IATA meeting in Cape Town, basically here, and they mentioned the overall average return was 1.3% on sales, basically, which is nothing. And you know this old joke here, I'm always telling this to people who wants to start an airline, how to become a millionaire. If a billionaire starts an airline, basically, it's an easy way. By the way, I told this the owner of Pegasus, which is a Turkish airline, a family, very rich family, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, we have a couple of billions." So,
we're okay.
But the basic problem is really profitability, and therefore, I think the only way is consolidation. And otherwise, basically, here we are losing this. By the way, we are 2 years flying 140 planes. We have several local airlines, so we know the problems.
Indeed, and ultimately,
I agree with you. And probably there would have been even more consolidation if the national laws or even international regulations did not become a barrier to those consolidations.
Indeed, which you have a point of view on, I believe.
Which is why we went the way of partnerships, actually.
Indeed.
Engaging and then taking minority shareholding in a few strategic partners.
And that's what's lovely, that it's putting the collaboration principle to life. So on the principle of collaboration and the fact that Terry and the board and all of USTOA are really making gestures to reach out to the international travel and tourism community, I'd like to please bring up to stage the new leaders of USTOA to join us in conversation. Jerry Fuqua, the chairman, and Paula Twiddell, please, the new vice chairperson. Please join us on stage, everyone. Brilliant. Now it has to be said, because this is just the perfect scene for it, we now have our rose between four thorns. So as long as we... On that, I'd love to understand very much, Jerry and Paula, from yourselves, what does this mean? How does your mental filter translate what we're hearing into the value of that information for USTOA members to grow in 2014 onwards? Paula, please.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's an honor to be here, not only with this group, but such an esteemed panel, and I'm very gracious about taking this new role, so I think it really marks the sign of a new organization, so thank you.
I know Malia's cheering you on. She's definitely.
Thank you.
She should.
In terms of what I've been hearing and engaging, is it about collaboration and engagement? I'm listening to such talented and influential people who have truly have a global intelligence, and bringing that to the forefront, what it means, it really aligns itself well with our strategic plan. We've talked about at USTOA, as we move into this new era, that our strategic plan aligns itself with dialogue, innovation, and education. What a great segue. Here's the dialogue, and it's in a Jay Leno style, but we've chatted a little bit last night just to get to know each other, and we were just fired up about what we were learning, and I feel that as a sponge. I always like to be a sponge to learn as much as possible and always committed to pass that on. And with this organization, we have the ability to do that.
Yes.
As members, things that are not proprietary. It's about gaining knowledge and fulfilling the expectation of our strategic plan. And with that, innovation and ideation comes about. And we change our business models accordingly to fulfill that expectation within our own businesses, because we want to maintain healthy business models, and we want to grow revenue and add to that growth product for the economies in which we house our companies. So I think it's terrific, and it really ties in very, very well what we're talking about.
Indeed. And Paula, in many ways, watching you last night in our first conversations, and now you give me a sense of my sponge isn't full yet.
No.
And that feeds into the fact that one of the greatest assets of USTOA is the network. You now have 3 very powerful new email addresses to add to your databases of people that you can reach out for that regular intelligence. And that's really important, the caliber of people that USTOA is making available to its members. So for that, we will be publishing your email addresses, and we thank you very much. You might want to warn your PAs. Jerry, please.
You know, it's encouraging to hear Vijay and Jim that it starts with the impression of the traveler when he or she gets on the airplane, or the jet. It all starts there, because as tour operators, sometimes we have to defend something that we didn't touch, we didn't control, and the entirety of the journey, the vacation, the experience relates back to that. And so the collaboration of you understanding that is so important, the improvements that are being made towards that, it's refreshing, and I'm pleased to hear it.
Indeed. And Terry made the point last evening about the desire for USTOA to become closer to airlines. And I think that recognition of the fact that if we are about delivering that excellence in traveler experience, it's living it through their experience from ground to destination and back home again. I can see Charu is twitching with a question.
I have a question for the panel, and I think more for Jerry and Paula. This is from Elizabeth Crable. International travel from Asian countries is primarily in groups. So is independent tour travel developing in these markets, in your opinion?
From those source markets?
The Asian markets.
I think primarily from what we're seeing, it's group travel. I think there's a bit of independent travel from probably the younger, but they're traveling in groups of identified people that they want to travel with rather than coming together on a pre-formed group. So that's the shift that we're seeing from that perspective.
But this will shift.
It'll shift again.
This will shift. We have a think tank, I mentioned this before, and we looked, I think, what the future Asian traveler, how they travel. And this is exactly also, I think, it's changing now. Away from the group travel, also more if they are more experienced, they are coming then along.
I think that word, that true is experience. You know, leaving your country for the first time is overwhelming. Can you imagine? You know, coming to a place like America versus, you know, other places, and if you do it the first time, the second time, the third time, you become more average, just like Americans do the first time they went to Europe. Well, there's a world out there beyond Europe that they're now finding.
Indeed. And James, what have you seen from your former home?
Yeah, no, I think it's similar. I used to joke in Japan that every Japanese person over 50 has already been to Honolulu, Los Angeles, and New York. They're ready for a new experience. And I think we're starting to see that come. Interest in new destination, interested in new kinds of experiences. And I expect that trend will continue not only in Japan, but in other markets as well.
Indeed. What do you find, I'm curious to know from a USTOA perspective, are the areas of, oh dear, our members need to get their hands around this, based on what you're hearing from our three great speakers?
I'll take a stab at it a little bit by saying infrastructure. That was mentioned earlier about how this global market is changing, and will we be able to handle it from an infrastructure standpoint? That could be within our own companies, certainly travel providers in the way of hotels, sightseeing, accommodations, and so forth. With the influx of passengers or guests coming from Asia inbound, there's also a return element. So it may affect our business in a different way if there's a lot of inbound traffic. What happens to the outbound traffic and the availability to sustain that business model that we have today for the outbound traffic to places like Asia? Cuba is a good example of that. There's a pent-up demand for Americans to travel to Cuba. So many of us have programs to Cuba, but the infrastructure needs to be considerably built up to be able to handle that demand. And if it ever opened up, you know, mainstream for us, we'd have to consider that and make sure we were ready for it. So as a business, we have to look at the entire customer journey, making sure that every piece of that journey is palatable for the customer so that they return. So those are the concerns that I think we would have.
Brilliant. Jerry?
I was just going to add on to Cuba. You know, part of what's interesting about Cuba, we have to travel very, very focused on a people-to-people license, which says you can do these things, you can't do those things. And the things that you can't do are some of the things that people that are Canadians, people that are Europeans do. They go to the beach and they go to the sun and the fun. It's brilliant, it's beautiful. We don't get to see that because it's not part of the people-to-people process. So we're being restricted, if you will, from what is all about travel. And that's an interesting thing. One additional thought is, you know, I'm very excited about what USTOA is doing with our think tank, with our really innovation lab, trying to understand what the customer looks like today. What is she thinking about? And I use the word she because it's primarily a woman-driven decision maker. What is she like today and what is she like tomorrow? Those who are already buying from us is one camp. Those that aren't yet, what do we need to do and what can we do to convert them? That's going to be very interesting to get some real numbers, some real meat, some real insights, some real intellect, because we're a bit brain drained. You know, we collectively have a lot of knowledge probably. We haven't put it together. So we don't know how it overlaps. We don't know how big the issue really is and how much we can really gain from it. It's exciting days ahead.
We're going to jump quickly to a question from Charu, but I also want to go back to a comment that Michael made right up front and make sure we don't lose it, because as we have the scramble for Chinese travelers, as we have all these billions of travelers running around the world, we have the very high risk of damaging the thing that we actually love most. How do we protect not only the travel experience, but the dream of the traveler that they had in the first place? Any thoughts you want to share on that, please?
There are two simple ways. One way is via price, really create exclusive, which is not very popular, basically. The other way is, give you an example, if you see Venice, Europe, with the big cruise ships coming in, basically. Venice is so crowded in the high season, I think it's makes not any fun, basically, to go there. Or Rome in the summer.
Absolutely.
So the only way, the other way is, and this is hard, basically, to find ways to control this in a way to control capacity.
Absolutely. Vijay?
Otherwise, you destroy these destinations. You destroy the attractiveness of the destination. This is, I'm pretty sure, coming in the next 5 years, with 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 billion travelers.
Absolutely.
See, when it comes to aviation, we recognize we do contribute 3% to impact on climate change. But we also think we have a responsibility to do what we can to minimize even that impact. So as an industry, we've committed to biofuel, We've committed to actually use 10% of biofuel between now and 2017. We've committed to actually cap our emissions by 2020, and we've committed to actually halve our emissions by 2050 as compared to 2005 levels. So we're doing as an industry what we can, but we're also urging governments to do what they can in terms of infrastructure, in terms of air traffic control, where significant savings can be made in terms of environmental impact, but also in terms of costs. We're also pushing the manufacturers to come up with much more fuel-efficient engines and aircraft. So if we work collaboratively, we'll actually make a better impact. Because at the end of the day, we are part of an industry which cannot be, if you want, eliminated. 53% of tourists today travel by air. When it comes to island destinations, that's almost 100%.
Absolutely.
So we are part of an equation, and we need to remain engaged and do our part to actually minimize our environmental impact. Because otherwise, we run the risk that, again, for the sort of cash cow or the sacrificial cow example I was giving, the governments will start either taxing or basically trying, worse, curb the growth of aviation, which will definitely have an impact on our sector. And travel and tourism.
And it's happening already. I think even for United, going back 20 years, we use roughly a third less fuel kind of per seat, per flight than we did 20 years ago. And if we look ahead at our plans for the next 5 years, we plan on growing about 2% a year, and each year we'll use less oil than the year before. So the benefits of technology are finally giving us a chance to do this in a meaningful way.
Indeed. And it's the consciousness of the strategies themselves.
And we want to work at the global level with ICAO, which is actually coming up with a global scheme by 2016 to work on minimizing the impact.
Indeed. Okay, you two cut it out now. I'm losing score. Charu, a couple questions to you.
A question from James Schillinglaw from Travel Pulse. What is the state of relations between airlines and tour operators today? And are they working more successfully to develop destinations?
Oh, we've got lots of smiles and thought bubbles on here. Who'd like to take that? I think ladies first.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I believe in the partnership. I'll be forever the optimist to say that it is all about partnerships and collaboration. That word, we used it a lot here, and I'm a real proponent of it. We don't do anything in life without partnership and compromise. With that, we want all businesses to be viable and sustainable. Tour operators want to sustain their business and satiate the needs of customers. Airlines want to do the same. Being a former airline person many moons ago, and by the way, it's for the Jay Leno couch, I will add that the reason why we thought it was better years ago, we didn't know any better. So it's a taste of seeing how the industry has evolved, and we have to make sure this marriage works with compromise. The customers, and I mentioned this earlier, the guest has a journey. And this journey entails getting from place A to place B to enjoy the destination. They're civic-minded, they're social-minded, their conscience is there, they want to have a good experience. And Jerry mentioned, that experience reflects on us as tour operators. And the more we have this dialogue, the more we reach out and study with the Innovation Lab, the more we educate ourselves and the people we represent, the stronger we will be, and those partnerships will work better in unity. We made an attempt at that, and I think it was certainly a very good first attempt at the caucus in DC 2 years ago now, and we had a panel where we were showing the value of tour operators with airlines as partners, because we as tour operators are another channel of distribution for the airline. So I will continue to be an eternal optimist and say this is what it's all about, and keeping this dialogue going and keeping it fresh, and understanding that at the end of the day, it's the guest experiences that we all care about, because that's the person or persons paying our paycheck and will sustain our business model for a long time.
Absolutely. Jerry, and then Michael, please.
That was very politically correct. James wants some news. Let me give you some news, James. You know, I think we're making huge progress, and I think the difference today is we're talking with each other instead of talking at each other. And I think the price of oil's had something to do with it. I think the resurgence of profitability's had something to do with it. And I also think that the understanding of what we're bringing to each other when we talk with each other has made profound differences. Now, if I could, Jim, Could I go into the revenue management department at United and make some best friends very soon?
Right.
Because those are the people that if they understood what a tour operator does and how a tour operator really works to base load, to manage yield, so it's there and you don't have to worry about it later. That's been a game changer in some other industries. So I think there's some work ahead, but I'm very pleased, as is Paula, with where we've come, and it's a promising future.
That's great. Please, Michael.
We see it slightly different. We believe still in an integrated model, as you know, and it's very interesting. Integrated model. We are operating 140 planes. We have more than 30 million customers. We have own hotels, but it's an integrated model combined with partnerships. You can't fly every client basically yourself. You need partners clearly. But the core of your business basically in the big core destinations, for Europe, Spain, for example, or Turkey, we have our own airline, because we don't want to become dependent on other airlines, basically, here, whatever happens in the airline world. And finally, it's a question make or buy, basically, here. As long as you can produce, I think, lower costs and high occupancies and utilization, basically, here, then I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a very important question for a new destination, for example. We made some experience. Once we wanted to develop Morocco, the north of Morocco, Tabaka, which is the green part. We built a couple of hotels, and finally, I think the development failed because nobody was willing to fly. Air Morocco was not willing. It's always the question of the egg and the hen, basically here. Who is starting this? And therefore, if you really want to develop some destinations, you have to also a secure airline capacity. This is important. It's a different model.
Indeed. Absolutely. I've been strategically ignoring Terry Dale because he's my timekeeper. You gave me the candy. I'm not going to let it go, I'm afraid. So last quick question from Charu, and then we'll go into the wrap-up itself, I promise.
This is from Jenna Fox, an editor at Travel Agent magazine. So how can travel industry pros convey the importance of travel agents to the world in general?
Great question. Who'd like to take that?
Well, I think it's clear based upon the numbers that come from USTOA members that 90% of package travel and independent travel and travel in general booked by USTOA members is through travel agents. So they're extremely important. I think the job and the road ahead for us is to re-engage the conversation and to train, to teach, and as we talked about before, talk with each other, and to really demonstrate the value of travel through a tour operator who's a member of USTOA. And there's huge strength in that. There's a lot of great opportunities for us to do more of that. And in the road ahead, in the next year's strategic plan, we'll start to deliver that for the very first time. So we're really happy because it's part of the engagement and part of the dialogue that we have with such an important distribution.
Brilliant. James has been doing a little goldfish routine for a few minutes, trying to get the words out. So
No, I think it's a great question. I think back even from when I started working in the airline business, I can recall planning my first trips with an interline hotel book, looking up, trying to figure out where I was going to go for the weekend. You fast forward to today, and all of that information is available at your fingertips.
That's right.
But what's not available in that same way today is expertise. And I think there's a big difference between information and expertise. And some of the shakeup we've seen in travel distribution has consolidated. The people that survived, the people that figured out how to run a viable business in a world of more and more pressure on distribution are the people who figured out what their expertise is and how to make a business out of it.
Brilliant. Quick last word from Vijay, please.
I think it's a question of the mindset. I mean, if we approach the industry with the customer as the focus, we work out who can best deliver the best service to the customer and work with us in a sustainable way, win-win. That's the way we can actually deliver a best service, because there are people who know our markets even better than we do. So we have to respect that, work with people. Remind me of a story of a big soda manufacturer coming to the Middle East and thinking actually make a big splash on marketing, and they brought a guru who came to say, well, language issues, we don't want to get into Arabic and so on. So we have 3 pictures to show the value of our product. The first picture was a sort of a man actually dying in the desert of thirst. The second one, he was drinking that soda. Third one, he looked very refreshed. And the sales in the Middle East just went down because they didn't realize that Arabs actually read from right to left.
That's great.
That's brilliant.
So the value of intelligence is so important.
Great example. So on that, ladies and gentlemen, it has been my great blessing and great honor, and I thank USTOA, I thank all of you, and I thank my great speakers for having the real joy of being with you all this morning. I hope you all found it very valuable, that you will grab these people's email addresses during the rest of the course of the day. But please, and to Charu as well, thank you. Please join me in thanking a really fantastic group of people. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charo. That was great. Thank you so much. That was great, BJ. Thank you. Thank you, Anita. That was great. Well, folks, if there's one thing I learned from this, and many more than just one thing, I found my dream team to take to our next congressional caucus June 17th and 18th, and I expect the rest of you to join the dream team in our nation's capital next June. So again, a round of applause for them. I thought they were tremendous. So obviously, we kept hearing two words: change, collaboration. And there's a lot of change, and there's certainly always a lot of collaboration at Tourism Cares, and leading that effort is our new President and CEO. Join me in welcoming Mike Ray, President and CEO of Tourism Cares. Mike?
Yep. Am I on? Can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. This is, you know, the first night for the member reception. Somebody talked about USTOA being a family, and it's just incredible to be here, incredible you counted part of it, and incredible to just the hospitality has been extraordinary. And I think it's a testament to everybody's care for giving back. We heard a lot about giving back, the need for it, the need for sustainability, the need for involving companies, employees, and destinations. It's a testament to Bruce Beckham, the staff, the board of directors, the donors, everybody who's been involved with Tourism Cares to this date. So actually, I'd like to shout out for everybody who knows about, has supported, has led, has staffed Tourism Cares. Let's give everybody a round of applause. So I want to spend a bit of time taking it forward, taking all these ideas about collaboration, making a difference, sustainability, and pulling them forward and talking about the power of travel and the power of philanthropy. The power of travel, I probably shouldn't even say anything. You guys know millions and millions more about the power of travel than I do. It's your business, it's your product, it's your livelihood, it's your craft, it's your art. It's what brought you into the business, and it's probably what keeps you in the business. But just to limber up and get our minds in a different space, just want to take a second for everybody to think about a journey that was particularly powerful for you, whether it was last year, whether it's next year going to Abu Dhabi, whether it's when you were much younger. Think about how travel has changed your life. Just think about it. And what are you thinking about, and how powerful was that? So this is a picture of Sean and Bob Whitley when they went to Egypt in around 2008. I was talking to Sean about it last night. Sounds like it was just this incredibly formative bonding experience for them. It was Sean's first trip to Egypt. But this picture's up here not just for the memories, but it's because the Whitley Memorial Fund at Tourism Cares is the first contributor to our new effort in Egypt. There's been a lot of conversation about Egypt here yesterday and today. And one of the first things that we did when I started was revisit our global approach and find a couple areas where there was a need to make an immediate difference through stewardship and philanthropy. And Egypt is number one, and another one we'll talk about is Myanmar. So I want to thank the Whitley family and the Whitley Memorial Fund for contributing to that. So let's take a second and talk about the power of giving back. Maybe a little bit different, maybe not universal across the room. But take a second and think about how a moment and an experience that you've had about giving back, whether it's money, whether it's time, and how that was a particularly powerful moment in your life. What are you guys thinking about? Is it recent? Is it with your family? This is a picture of my daughter, Elsie. It's around a year ago. We volunteered at a food bank in Seattle, and this was one of the best days of my life. We took these big bags of bread mix, 30-pound bags, and simply put them down into 3-pound bags. And like we were weighing them and sifting them and putting them in these bags, and my daughter was putting these labels on them, and that was it. But it was such an extraordinary experience for me to be with her and for her to engage in work. There wasn't homework or preschool work, but to work for somebody else, and also through that to learn about other people, and learn about hunger in the state of Washington, and to learn that so many people in this world are far less fortunate than we are. So that's the power of giving back. So I'm here, I'm honored to have this role because of the incredible power of bringing those together for people. So one last exercise, take a moment and think about when in your life these things have come together, the power of places and travel and the power of helping those places. Are you thinking about ideas? Are you thinking about something your company has done? Are you thinking about something you've done? Are you thinking about something you've heard from a tour director or a client? And how powerful and cool was that? So that's the spirit that we serve at Tours and Cares. And I'll just tell you a couple stories of how I've actually seen this happen. A couple of jobs ago, I founded an organization called Give to Asia, spent 10 years building a very large, tailored, custom giving operation for anybody in America that wanted to support something in Asia. We had a large tsunami fund, and this is one of my favorite grants. We get to play favorites even in philanthropy. So this was the result of a $50,000, in the grand scheme of things, not that much money, $50,000 grant to the Chefs Guild of Sri Lanka after the tsunami. They'd never done anything before. They wanted to give back, so they did what they could do. They decided to train youth in a fishing village in southern Sri Lanka that was hit down by Galle, if anybody knows Sri Lanka, that was hit by the tsunami. I went back. I was most recently at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but I was doing US education work, and I wanted to find out, I wanted to get back in touch with international law. More than anything, I want to find out what happened to our money. So I paid somebody in Sri Lanka to track down 20 of the 100 people who went through this 8 years later, and where were they today? And some of them weren't working in culinary stuff at all. This probably isn't the first career for everybody. Some people don't like what they study, but the vast majority of them were working in hospitality and travel. Some were working at the Colombo Hilton, some were working in the Middle East, some were probably working in Abu Dhabi. And this fellow, he was going to join the army in the midst of Sri Lanka's civil war before he took this class. He took it, and now he's working in India. He has a great career, and he's sending money back to his family and to support his family back in Sri Lanka. You know, philanthropy is a two-way experience. It's not about giving only. It has to be about you as well. And I've always felt that in my career of philanthropy. If that feedback loop isn't happening, you're wasting some of the opportunity and power and energy about philanthropy. So this is back in September, our last Tourism Cares' last Tourism Cares for America volunteer give back event. We had 270 people from around the travel industry go to Plymouth Plantation, this absolute historic, iconic spot in America. And for anybody that was there, me included, I can simply say it was a really cool experience, and it's formed me. I talk about it, and it is just extraordinary. So again, this is the spirit that Tourism Care serves, travel and philanthropy. Our mission is to preserve and enrich the travel experience for future generations. And we think about that when we think about the travel experience, and people before me had talked about the travel experience, it's not just the traveler. It's also professionals. It's also destination communities. And you can't take any one of those parties out of the experience. So we need to serve and support all three. How do we do that? We do that in two ways. One way, speaking of collaboration, it was mentioned so much today. I loved Terry when it came up yesterday. One of the things we do is rally the industry together and focus time, talent, and treasure on places that we think as a group are priorities. Whether it's Plymouth, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Myanmar, which we're going to talk about for a second, whether it's our next US event at Miami Marine Stadium, which is going to be extraordinary. That's one of the things we do. The other thing we do is actually empowering and giving back, which is we also believe that philanthropy is good. We're going to talk about some statistics, and it's good for you, it's your companies, your employees, and your travelers. So we want you and every single company to be empowered in philanthropy, and that's very different from saying we should work in these places. We want everybody to enjoy the power of travel and philanthropy. So now, as I sort of enter the second half of this, I want to pull it up a notch, and not just from travel and philanthropy for people, but a vision for travel, for the travel industry and corporate social responsibility on a macro level. So some of you maybe know this, but there's a lot of research out there about giving and volunteering. This is from a Network for Business Sustainability survey in 2011 that showed there's a high correlation between giving back and financial performance. It's good for your business. There's a little bit that says it's maybe ambivalent, but this analyzes 30 years of research on corporate social responsibility. So our vision for the industry, it'd be wonderful if every single company, large or small, engaged in social responsibility based on their goals, their business, their values, in support of their financial and social performance both. Volunteering is great HR policy. Maybe you know this, maybe you've heard about it. There's a whole wealth of data on volunteering is good for you and your culture, and I know many of you have really robust volunteering programs. But this is some data from a United Healthcare and volunteer match study that just shows it increases employee loyalty, morale, team building. Volunteering is extremely important for you and your teams, and if every company's supporting that, engaging in volunteerism and supporting their employees, if everybody's doing that, that would be absolutely incredible for the industry. Now, from the same study, volunteering is great for people, for everybody if you volunteered, but a lot of these respondents to this one survey said it actually made them happier and healthier. And for some of them, it had them deal with chronic illnesses. So volunteering for the individual is also very important. So can you imagine a world when we're all tapping this fountain of youth of volunteering as much as we can, and we're all finding our way to longevity through volunteering. And then lastly, we talked about clients and the consumers. This is from a really great Edelman study a couple years ago called Good Purpose. And it looks and it talks about what consumers expect from companies in terms of social responsibility and how they think corporations are performing. And there's a gap here. So imagine a world, how incredible would it be if travel and tourism, whose product is so incredibly entwined with people and places and destinations and the sustainability and through line between those places, how incredible would it be if travel and tourism set the bar across all industry for giving back and stewardship? Maybe we're not quite there yet, but can you imagine what that would do? Can you imagine what that would do on the Hill? Be very exciting. And that's the spirit that Tourism Cares is supporting. And lastly, our destinations need our stewardship as well as our business. We've talked about that several times. We've launched an Egypt effort. We have a couple of advisors in Egypt, and we're working on some programs there. And we're also starting up in Myanmar. And these are two very different destinations. But we had a research team that just left Myanmar. And you guys, again, many of you know better than I do. These numbers are going to change dramatically. Who knows what Myanmar tourism year-to-year growth is going to be like in a year or two. I've talked to many of you. People are building boats, hotels, starting tours. It's going to go up exponentially. And there's a lot to do there right now to prepare Myanmar and the community for that growth. And we're starting a program there as well. So whoa, there's a lot to do. From Good Purpose from this study, what do consumers think that companies should be doing? Some of this will look familiar. Giving back, volunteering, partnering with NGOs, collaborating with other companies is the bottom. There's our buzzword. So if this feels a little daunting, or it's like, wow, we do some of that, but we're in the business of travel, just one thing to note is I've been doing this for 20 years. Tourism Cares and its staff and board has been involved in this for 10 years. You know, this is our core competency. It may not be yours, although there's incredible expertise scattered around the industry. We want to both harness that and support people that are looking for support. So lastly, 5 quick steps on what you can do today to actually make a difference. One is go get a bidder number, bid for the silent auction. It supports Tourism Cares. There's some incredible stuff out there. There's a piece of Dale Chihuly custom glass, the blue glass object, that doesn't have any bids on it that you could probably turn around and make a profit on eBay for 2,000 bucks. So, you know, there's amazing stuff out there. There's a full package trip to Myanmar. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and thank you to everybody, every company that gave to the silent auction, to TripMate and McBreen Copco, our sponsors. Become a member. We have a number of corporate partnerships. We're going to be revitalizing our program, but we really, really can use all the support we can. Come to Miami at the end of May. It's going to be extraordinary. The volunteer experience is going to be very, very special. We're going to be in Southern California after that. My cell phone and email are up here. You know, this is a dialogue and collaboration. Certainly want to hear from you. And then lastly, get involved. We have just started a new global impact portfolio. We do work in Mexico, Peru, and Haiti as well, but our big priorities right now are Egypt and Myanmar. Give any amount, please. We have a match for global programs from Robin Tauk for $10,000, but it expires around Christmas time. And this is a real match. We're not going to get any of that money if we actually don't get donations. So make a gift, make it for somebody in your family, make it for a niece or nephew, and I will pledge to you that we will communicate with you about what we're going to do, what we've done, and share the power of travel and philanthropy to the people who you give it on behalf of. I want to thank our first investors to the fund, Bob Whitley Memorial Fund, Travel Market Report, and Abercrombie & Kent, which has donated trips to Myanmar and Egypt. Our core foundation partners, Delta, TripMate, and Travel Weekly. And then lastly, we have a second challenge on the books, and Travel Mark Insurance is one of the first donors to it. The three chairmen of Tourism Cares, Arthur Tauk, Dan Sullivan, and Brad Finkel, have each contributed $10,000 to a group match to help support our growth and what we need to do in 2014 going forward. So anyway, thank you if I ran over a bit, Terry, but 5 things you can do, and more than anything, thank you for allowing me to be up here and reflect on the power of travel and philanthropy.
I think you can see why the board is very excited about this new leadership, but we are equally excited about the contributions of one individual for so many years to Tourism Cares. And I'd like to invite the immediate past chair of Tourism Cares, Dan Sullivan, the CEO of Colette, to join me to make a presentation here. You can use this mic here. There you go. Yep.
Before we have Bruce come up on stage, I just want to, Bruce Beckham and myself go back a long time. We're Beckham Tours and Colette. We used to play softball together, and really, as Tourism Care started as Travelers Conservation Fund back in the 90s, Bruce Beckham came on board and really changed the dynamics of Tourism Cares as being a just USTOA. He brought on all the key partnerships from NTA and ABA and ASTA, the cruise industry, the airline industry, because this is global, and Bruce really brought that together. And you could see from the presentations on Tourism Cares all the great work that's going forward, and was all set up by Bruce. So just want to read something that on the commemoration. Bruce, would you like to come up? So let's see if we can, Bruce, as the United States Tour Operator Association presented to Bruce Beckham in recognition of his distinguished and devoted service as Tourism Cares Executive Director and his abiding commitment to the USTOA creed, integrity in tourism, Bruce Beckham. You want to get in there?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Mike, for such a great presentation. Isn't he great? This guy is going to take it there. Change is inevitable, and change is good. You go first, I did. We brought on Mike, and he has a great background and great enthusiasm and great ideas. So he's going to do a great job, and I'm so proud of that choice. But just from a historical point of view, and just to let you know that this is my 20th consecutive USTOA conference, and so that just kind of proves that proves nothing except I'm old. But really, the point is the fact that the things that I've done for Tourism Cares and the Travelers Conservation Foundation really was a labor of love. It was something that happened in 2000. John Stacknick, my good friend, who unfortunately couldn't be here today because of the loss of his mother-in-law. Mary's mother died the other day, so it's a shame that they can't be here. We send the condolences. But he called me and he said, that USTOA has a new foundation called the Travelers Conservation Foundation. We'd like to have you come and be the executive director. You can continue doing your educational seminars and your speaking and so on and so forth that you do. It'll take 50% of your time, and you could do this in your sleep. Well, I haven't slept since, and it took up until July of this year about 120% of my time, but I could not be more proud than what has been accomplished, but it's been accomplished not by me, but by you and your generosity. So thank you so much, and continue to support Tourism Cares in whichever way you can, and follow Mike, the new leader. Thanks.
What a perfect way to wrap up a great session. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you at the luncheon hosted by our great friend Jordan. So enjoy the rest of the day.